All right, everyone. Well, it looks like everybody safely made it to week 2, so that's a good sign. And I hope you found the Q&A before this helpful. If you were hung up on any of the terminal issues in the first week, hopefully that cleared it up. But in this lesson, we are going to talk about the languages of the web. And this is essentially going to be the kickoff for the actual web design part of this class. And what we're going to do this week is we're going to kind of take a broad look at everything. We're going to learn about all of the different languages, well, 3 today, but the primary core languages that make up modern web design. So without further ado, the languages of the web. So we're all pretty familiar with websites. We've got a pretty basic website. And this website is made up of a whole bunch of different parts, or a whole bunch of different languages. And I'm not talking about, the different parts of the website, like the header and the titling and the paragraph. I'm talking about the actual markup that makes up this site. So we have a few things here. At the core, we have HTML. And we already did a little bit of HTML last week when we did our Hello World application, and we're actually going to expand on that a little bit today. So HTML is kind of makes up the foundation of our website. Depending on what type of style sheets we're using, you may not see any of the kind of raw browser style HTML. You would see it kind of decorated with CSS. But on any modern web browser, if you go to the View Source menu, you can basically take a look at the HTML, which is what the browser is reading and interpreting to you on the browser. So at its core, HTML is the foundation of any website. On top of that, we have to add some stylistic properties to the website. So it used to be that we would just jam those styles right into the HTML. We might use a bunch of different images and some tables to create a layout, or we might kind of use some inline HTML trickery to get style or some really rudimentary colors. Now we use what's called CSS, or cascading style sheets. And we briefly introduced this last week, but CSS are what gives the page its unique style. So it's what gives this navigation header the ability for each of the elements to sit next to each other. CSS is what allows this image to what we call float to the left of the header. Because usually when you're dealing in HTML, as you're creating tags, your HTML is block level. So if you have a paragraph of text here, it would insert your paragraph of text. And then if you were to insert an image, it would put the image below that. So this is a little image here. And then if you were to insert some more text, it would put that below that. And if you were to insert a header, it might put that below that, like that. So it's very, very structured and not a whole, it's very linear, very from the top to the bottom of the page. And there wasn't really a whole lot you could do with that. Now with CSS allows me to take this image and stick it up here. It allows me to change the font family of this paragraph, and it allows me to make this H1 tag maybe a little bit smaller, maybe a 14-point font. And we'll get more into font sizing later. That's not necessarily the best way to size fonts, but you get what I'm saying. So CSS is our stylistic layer above HTML. So CSS looks at our HTML tags and then it applies a style rule to that particular tag. And I guess that brings me back to HTML. When we're dealing with HTML, we're always going to be dealing with tags, and HTMLs have closing and opening tags. So you're probably pretty familiar with like a paragraph tag. So insert some paragraph stuff here, and then our closing tag. So this is an opening tag, and this is our closing tag, and you can see this / here to close the tag off. And then anything in between these two tags is considered a paragraph. And then the browser knows how to display that text, and our CSS knows how to display that text. And we can get at that CSS simply by creating a new rule for the paragraph. And we'll get into those CSS rules a little bit more once we get into the demos this week. So The first two things we have are HTML and CSS. HTML is the foundation, it's the building block, that's where all of our markup is. HTML is a markup language. And we have CSS, which we use to then apply style to that markup. And it's very important that we keep those things separate. We want our HTML and our content to be very semantically sound. We don't want it littered with stylistic things like bold tags or italic tags or images that are strictly there for style and not meaning. We want to avoid that, and we want to try to place as much of that as possible into our CSS style sheets. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So the last part of this website that we're going to be touching on is this Twitter feed down here. Now, there are a bunch of different ways to get a Twitter feed into your website, but one of the more popular solutions, and you'll see this a lot with, especially in the social world, with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these social companies, they have what are called widgets. And these widgets basically are little JavaScript programs. And these little JavaScript programs run in the browser and allow some level of interactivity in your web pages. So JavaScript, which you'll see is .js files, and we're going to do a little bit of JavaScript this week, so you'll kind of get introduced to that. And that's kind of my goal here, is to introduce you guys to these three core languages. We're going to expand on our Hello World this week, and then in the coming weeks, we're going to build in each area. So we're going to spend a few weeks on HTML, then CSS, and then JavaScript, and then finally put them all together. So back to JavaScript, these little widgets actually insert a bit of JavaScript into your site, which kind of automatically pulls HTML or the content from your Twitter stream and places it in your website. You don't actually have to write any JavaScript to get some of these widgets to work. A lot of times you'll just be dropping that code in. One of the kind of the most well-known drop-in JavaScript code chunks is Google Analytics. So Google Analytics is the program that you would use to track the people coming to your website. So you'd look at how many hits you got in a particular day, what browser they were using, where they came from, all sorts of information. And that is just a little JavaScript snippet that you place into your website, and the JavaScript is executed on Google servers, and it adds that analytic functionality to your website. So that's an interesting way to add code and to add functionality to your website through JavaScript. And we're going to do a really basic JavaScript interaction today, so you'll kind of see how all three of these play together in a single page. So that's what we're going to do next. Just a quick recap though. The foundation of most modern websites today is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to varying degrees and varying complexity. HTML is our markup language. This is going to structure our content and give our website some underlying structure. This is the main language that the browser is going to read. CSS, or cascading style sheets, are a file of essentially style rules that the browser will read and apply to the appropriate parts of the page. So CSS is what allows us to get nice, fancy design and also add an incredible amount of usability to our websites by being able to craft really nice user experiences for our users and visitors. And finally, we have JavaScript. JavaScript is the only programming language available in the browser. It's essentially the programming language of the browser, and we use it to do lots of different tasks, everything from scripting the DOM to inserting Google Analytics into our website to getting a Twitter feed to show up. And we'll do a little bit of JavaScript in this week's lessons. So that's about it. These are the languages of the web, or at least the ones we're going to concentrate on for the next month or so. And in the next video, we'll get into the code and we'll get into the browser and we'll go from there. See you guys soon.